The Eagles Are Back by Dorothy Hinshaw Paton. In his 1999 Fourth of July celebration speech, President Bill Clinton declared that our national symbol, the bald eagle, was no longer endangered. This welcome news for wildlife wasn't just the result of good luck. For more than 20 years, scientists and volunteers across the country have worked to help the bald eagle come back, and come back it did. Once bald eagles spread their wings over every state except Hawaii. Before European settlement, however, between 25,000 and 75,000 bald eagles lived in the lower 48 states, with thousands more in Alaska. But as settlers cut down trees and turned wilderness into towns and cities, the number of eagles began to decline. At first, the number of eagles dwindled slowly. Then, during the late 1940s, bald eagle populations began to plummet, and where eagles did survive, few raised chicks. By the mid-1960s, many biologists feared our national bird would disappear forever. Fewer than 500 breeding pairs of bald eagles were left in the lower 48 states. Luckily, scientists soon discovered the major cause of the bald eagle's decline, the pesticide DDT. Starting in the late 1940s, DDT was widely used to control insects such as mosquitoes and crop pests. But while it did kill pests, DDT also got into the food chain, and eagles ate contaminated fish and other prey. The DDT didn't kill eagles, but it did weaken the shells of their eggs. When a parent nestled up to its eggs to warm them, the shells would break, killing the developing birds inside. Other birds, such as the pelicans and ospreys, were having the same problem. Something had to be done. In 1972, the U.S. government banned DDT. Then in 1973, the all-important Endangered Species Act was passed by Congress. The Endangered Species Act protects plants and animals whose populations are so small that they might disappear forever. If a species is in danger of becoming extinct, it is listed as endangered. A species at risk of becoming endangered is called threatened. The bald eagle was listed as endangered in 43 states and threatened in 5. Only in Alaska was the bald eagle holding its own. Wait, Louie. Eagles started to recover in 1974 when the effects of leftover DDT began to wear off. But the government didn't stop there. Places where bald eagles lived were protected. Eagles require gigantic trees to build their huge nests. They feed largely on fish and water birds, so they need to live near undisturbed lakes, ponds, and rivers. When bald eagles nested on public land, people were kept away so the birds wouldn't be bothered. And anyone who killed a bald eagle had to pay a large fine. Because a pair of eagles normally produces just 2 eggs each year, scientists searched for ways to increase the number of eagles faster. One way to do this was to raise eagle chicks in captivity. Bald eagles were brought to the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center in Maryland and bred there. As soon as a female eagle laid a clutch of eggs, they were removed and kept warm so that they would hatch. Most birds then laid 2 more eggs, which they weren't allowed to care for. The extra eggs would be placed in the nest of a pair of eagles whose eggs didn't hatch. The foster parents would then raise the chick or chicks as their own. In this way, 4 eaglets instead of 2 could be raised from each mated pair. By the time the program ended in 1988, 124 bald eagles had been hatched there for release into the wild. Young eagles can learn to live on their own through a method called hacking. When captive eaglets are 8 weeks old, they are given a new home high on a tower or in an abandoned eagle nest in a good eagle habitat. Humans who stay out of sight bring food for the young birds until they can fly and hunt well enough to feed themselves. All the work to save bald eagles paid off. The number of bald eagles in the lower 48 states has increased steadily since 1975. Turn to the next passage. Bald eagles make a comeback in Chicago. The following passage is from a television news report that was broadcasted on April 16, 2012. Brian Williams and Kevin Tibbles are television news reporters. Brian Williams is talking here. He's the anchor. Finally, tonight, bald eagles, the symbol of America, came close to being totally wiped out in America. But they've made a remarkable comeback, as you may know, in recent years. So much so, they're not just showing up in the wilds of Maine and Montana. They may live a lot closer to you than you think. A report from NBC's Kevin Tibbles. Kevin Tibbles reporting. Some new neighbors are raising a family in St. Paul, Minnesota. In the 50 years Stan Wandersee's lived in this house, he's seen many come and go, but never any like these. Mr. Stan Wandersee says, this is a gift of nature. Back to Tibbles. The bald eagle is returning to areas of urban sprawl that pollution forced it to abandon decades ago. Ms. Megan Ross says, from the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, Illinois. DDT was a really big problem for the bald eagles. Bald eagles in particular were not able to form appropriate shells, and so, since they weren't able to reproduce, their numbers really plummeted. Back to Tibbles. Once on the endangered species list, this majestic symbol of American pride is spreading its wings, and many can now see them in a setting that doesn't involve a trip to the zoo. Ms. Ross says, I think bald eagles are just such majestic creatures. It'll be really nice and exciting to see them right in our backyard. Tibbles says, when this pair nested at the Alcoa plant in Davenport, Iowa, employees set up a webcam to share these intimate pictures of the eaglets with the world. It's had 5 million views this year alone. This secluded forest preserve sits hidden from the roughly 10 million people who call Chicago home. Yet here, just a few miles from the skyscrapers, is something that hasn't been seen in 100 years. An eagle's nest. The fact that they've come back. Does that tell us anything? And then Mr. Chris Marenowitz from the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, Illinois says, I think it tells us a lot. It tells us that we're doing the right thing. Tibbles says, and it was a close call. By the 1960s, just 450 pairs of eagles remained in the lower 48 states. Today, those numbers have soared to more than 9,000, giving hope these treasured icons can once again live side by side with the humans who cherish them. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Chicago. Okay, turn to the last article about eagles, called Bald Eagle Deaths Raising Concerns. Saturday, April 7th, 2012. At least 7 bald eagles have died in eastern Texas in the past year because of unintended encounters with power lines, an alarming rate of death at a time when the once endangered species is rebounding, federal wildlife officials said. Jim Steinbaugh, a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service special agent based in Houston, said the raptors died from electrocutions or impacts involving power lines and poles in 6 counties, including Harris. It is happening more often, and because of the eagle's resurgence, it's going to increase, he said. The bald eagle, a national symbol almost wiped out by pesticide, pollution, and hunters in the 1960s, is flourishing again in Texas and across the country. The Interior Department removed the large and charismatic bird from the protection of the Endangered Species Act 5 years ago, with about 10,000 mating pairs nationwide. At the time of the species status changed, Texas had 156 breeding pairs, up from a historic low of 5 in 1970, according to the Texas Department of Parks and Wildlife. Since then, the state agency has not conducted annual population surveys of bald eagles because of the financial cost, said Brent Ortego, a state biologist. Ortego said he thinks the eagle population has continued to grow at a rate of about 10% a year. We think they're doing okay, he said, but we do not have the data. Still, Ortego said the number of deaths in the past year is high, and those are just the ones they found. As the population grows, the birds have had to adapt to the hubbub of humanity. They prefer forested areas near rivers and lakes, the same kind of places that also are drawing more people, more buildings, and more energy needs. Power poles and lines are particularly attractive to birds, especially eagles, hawks, and falcons, which use them to spot prey. The problem arises when electricity transmission wires are within the distance of an eagle's wingspan, which ranges from 6 feet to 8 feet. The danger comes from the potential to touch two lines, said Jeff Della Rosa, Ecological Programs Manager for CenterPoint Energy Incorporated, which delivers power to Houston. The eagle is such a large bird, a lot of poles do not have that kind of spacing. In January, an eagle carrying prey struck CenterPoint lines near the San Jacinto River in East Harris County. Crews found the dead bird while working to restore power in the area after the incident. CenterPoint responded by providing a plan to prevent electrocutions to federal authorities. The strategies include installing raptor guards that prevent eagles from roosting on wires and poles, and working with Houston Audubon and other bird enthusiasts to identify lines near nests for extra precautions. The young ones can be awkward and do not make the best decisions, Della Rosa said. Authorities can seek criminal prosecution of companies and others for bird deaths under the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty. Steinbaugh, however, said companies such as CenterPoint Energy recognize the problem and have done a good job taking corrective actions.